This month, a video game will come out. A game about wizard school and goblins. I'm sure you've heard about it because it sure seems to be all anyone wants to talk about these days. Arguments fly from every direction. Some people are excited to play as a wizard casting spells. Some are boycotting the game. And some are caught in the middle, not knowing what to do. This video, though, is not about that game. This video is about the figure at the center of the controversy, J.K. Rowling. Yes, you've stumbled upon yet another YouTube video about J.K. Rowling, but I do promise you this one will be different than the others you've seen. Probably not better, but I'll do my best. I'm not interested in investigating just how awful and transphobic Miss Rowling is. You can discover that in videos by Jessie Gender and Sean. I'm not interested in talking about Harry Potter. You can learn more about that in videos by Princess Weeks and Hoots. No, I'm interested in one tweet J.K. Rowling made in 2020, a tweet dropped right when she was coming out as a TERF. A tweet that actually predates my own Twitter account, but like a dog to a bone buried in their backyard, I take it out and gnaw on it from time to time, trying to figure out just what it means. The tweet in question reads,
I respect every trans person's right to live in a way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so.
On the face of it, there's nothing particularly wrong with this tweet. When I first read it, I wanted it to be true. I wanted this famous author to not be a total jerk. I mean, if I, a trans woman, tweeted this out this morning, I doubt it would cause much kerfuffle outside of the fact that I'd be quoting a known transphobe. I, myself, also respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I, too, would march with people like me if they were being discriminated against. And my life has been shaped by being female, and I don't think it's harmful to say that. So, why has this tweet marinated in my brain for so long? It would be easy, given Miss Rowling's hateful conduct in recent years, to hand-wave away this statement, throw up a Tyler the Creator meme, and call it a day. But I'm not so sure it's that simple. What if J.K. Rowling was being sincere? What if she meant what she wrote? It seems like a stupid conjecture, as nothing she's done or written since would confirm it. I can't show you evidence to prove she was sincere, and I doubt she would be open to an interview with someone who embodies the specter of evil she publicly attacks every day, who she actively attempts to undermine politically at every turn. And even if she did, she'd probably find the question offensive and reaction baiting. So what do we do? Well, that's what this video is about. Sincerity. What is sincerity? How can we tell if someone is being sincere? Does sincerity matter? You see, sincerity is important to me. Actually, it's too important to me, which is why Miss Rowling's tweet refuses to leave my imagination. I'm an earnest believer in the power and importance of sincerity. I genuinely try to live my life as sincerely as possible. But if she could sincerely tweet that out, then not actually follow through with anything she expressed, it shows that sincerity has its limits and isn't all I put my personal faith in. So come watch as I purposefully question my worldview for your amusement. Merriam-Webster defines the word sincere as free of dissimulation, free from adulteration, and marked by genuineness. So that's two antonyms and one synonym. Dissimulate means to hide under a false appearance, or to be without false appearance. True. Adulteration essentially means to be adulterated or corrupted, debased, made impure. So sincerity is anything that's not those things. Finally, the layup, genuineness, means actual, true, free from hypocrisy or pretense. Though Merriam-Webster's definition probably didn't tell you anything you didn't know. Words usually mean an amalgamation of different things. They are moving targets, hard to pin down. But when we say sincere, we generally mean that action or statement which is true to the actor or speaker, free from any corrupted motivation, consistent with their internal character. Yet, not even our common history of the word sincere is impure. The popular understanding is that it's derived from the Latin phrase without wax, ostensibly a reference to a way sculptors might modify their work and conceal blemishes. To be without wax is to be just the rock before you, no concealment to adjust the view. But historians of words have proven this etymology false. So we're left with a less interesting word, one mired by some amount of insincerity. That's not to say those Latin and speaking Greek folks didn't leave us with anything to contemplate the depths of sincerity though. In the Nichomachean ethics, our old buddy Aristotle discusses truthfulness and plots out why he views sincerity as valuable. On one side of his truthiness chart, he puts the vices of deficiency, such as false modesty and self-deprecation. On the other side, he puts vices of excess, meaning vanity and arrogance. Only in the middle, with sincerity, can a speaker avoid pretension. Aristotle's formulation is actually pretty odd for most modern linguistical sensibilities. We tend to not put sincerity in the middle of differing actions or modes of self-expression, but above and below them. Like, instead of Aristotle's single x-axis, we add a y-axis for sincerity. So, you could have someone boasting about how great of a driver they are, but they could be sincere, meaning they really believe they are an amazing driver, or insincere, meaning they do not actually believe they possess the skills to race in Formula One. To Aristotle, both of these fictitious individuals would be insincere, since they aren't finding that perfect golden mean between self-deprecation and boastfulness. Modern cultures generally do not conflate sincerity with truthfulness. Someone can say, the sky is red, and if they genuinely believe it, we would say they're being sincere in their speech, even if they are objectively wrong. Sincerity in this formulation is independent of speech. You don't need to know the words they're using, their character, their past, present, or future to know if someone is being sincere. Only if they themselves believe in what they are saying or doing, in which case they are sincere. This style of sincerity runs into some problems. To whom is one sincere to? Themselves as they currently are, their ideal self, some external convictions? It's hard to pin down, but Lionel Trilling sure tried hard through his lectures, later compiled into a book titled Sincerity and Authenticity. Trilling, through Shakespeare, defines sincerity as the avoidance of being false to any man through being true to oneself, and argues that during the pre-Enlightenment times of Shakespeare, it was the definitive characteristic of Western culture for some 400 years. Though Trilling is quick to complicate the concept.
We play the role of being ourselves. We sincerely act the part of a sincere person, with the result that a judgment may be passed upon our sincerity that is not authentic.
Drawing a distinction between the two synonyms, Trilling suggests authenticity has a more strenuous moral experience than sincerity.
A more exigent conception of the self and of what being true to it consists of. A wider reference to the universe and man's place in it, and less acceptant and genial view of the social circumstances of life.
I'll try to put it differently. Whereas sincerity is beholden to the individual's personal sensibilities, authenticity is more beholden to the wider world. For instance, for a Picasso painting to be authentic, it must have been painted by Picasso. And for Picasso to have been authentic while painting it, he needed to be in concordance with a most strictly ideal version of himself, not just some version of himself that day. For Trilling, the historical idea of authenticity was not just truth to one's own code, but an external moral reality the individual adheres to and believes in. Yet, others eschew this idea of authenticity and believe sincerity is purely a matter of talent. Aldous Huxley, writer of Brave New World, describes sincerity in such a way.
The truth is that sincerity in art is not an affair of will, of a moral choice between honesty and dishonesty. It is mainly an affair of talent. A man may desire with all his soul to write a sincere, a genuine book, and yet lack the talent to do it. In spite of his sincere intentions, the book turns out to be unreal, false, and conventional.
Huxley, in essence, argues that to be sincere, one must hone their ability to communicate the true depths of their soul, and without training and talent, one's attempt to be genuine will ring hollow and insecure, not because they lack honesty, but because they lack the skill to communicate in a novel and sincere way. Though it's worth noting that Huxley is specifically writing about what he views as great art, and not sincerity as a moral imperative, but I believe it's still relevant to our discussion. In recent decades, sincerity has been defined primarily as a reaction to postmodernity. Irony, a useful tool for criticizing the large institutions that became prominent in the post-war period, has, to some degree, fallen out of favor. The New Sincerity movement, associated with the author David Foster Wallace, aims to find something beyond the cage of sarcasm. Yet, it's not that sincerity died and was resurrected, it was just underground. One artist who embodies this concept of sincere in the most profound way is Daniel Johnston. Johnston, an independent musician, was incredibly prolific, but existed almost completely outside the mainstream. He first got his music out there by handing it to patrons at his McDonald's job. Most of his recordings are lo-fi, recorded in his home rather than a studio. His songs are not particularly complicated, and his lyricism doesn't follow meter well and doesn't contain fresh turns of phrase. Yet, what his music lacks in sonic and songwriting complexity, it abounds in creativity and earnestness. It feels like Johnston reaches a whole different level of sincerity from what we're used to with artists. The lack of any bells or whistles, any marketing or promotion, any fame or money on the line, evidenced by the homemade artwork on his albums, the poor quality of his recordings, and his nowhere near conventional singing voice, all create an ambiance. What you're listening to is the real deal. The sincere, authentic Daniel Johnston, or at least that's how it appears. My favorite line in any of his songs is from Peekaboo, where he sings, "When I'm down, really down, nothing matters, nothing does. I close my eyes to go to sleep, but I can't sleep, I can't sleep." You can listen to these songs, have a good time, and walk away. But for me, it's not that easy. I have to live these songs forever. Please hear my cry for help and save me from myself. You don't even have to sing these lyrics to feel how pained Johnston must have felt when he wrote them. From Johnston, we find a vision of sincerity seemingly divorced from the incentives of society and culture. None of these versions of sincerity, though, from Aristotle to Trilling to Johnston, are the correct definition. Words have fluid meanings, and we can use the same word in different circumstances to mean different things. So let's try to look at Miss Rowling's tweet through the various lenses we've just defined. Just as a reminder, that tweet was, "I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so." Aristotle, regardless of his views on transgender people, which unfortunately have not survived the historical record, I did not actually look that up, would probably take umbrage with Rowling's statement. Remember, Aristotle drew a distinction between the vices of excess and deficiency, the latter being when someone underestimates themselves or their ability, and the former being when they overestimate it through exaggeration, vanity, or arrogance. It's difficult in hindsight to not find Rowling a little vainglorious in her full-throated support of trans people's rights, because trans people are being discriminated against on the basis of being trans. But she's not marching with us. Actually, she's the one promoting the discrimination. Rowling here is being ostentatious, right? From Aristotle's point of view, she wants the credit for being an LGBT ally, when in reality, she's not within his golden mean of sincerity. Okay, so what? I'm sure most of us don't exactly line up with Aristotle's 2,000-year-old definition of sincerity. Perhaps Trilling's more authentic sincerity is more in JK's style. Remember, Trilling first defines sincerity as being true to oneself, but then reaches for this greater, more specific idea of authenticity, which is rooted in something external to the speaker themselves. Unfortunately, Rowling runs into some trouble here. While this tweet is rather short, as all tweets are, it actually does propose an external moral value Rowling is committed to: respecting trans people, marching with us if we're discriminated against. She invokes a particular course of moral action that she views as righteous and good. Otherwise, why would she bring it up? Unfortunately, she has not followed through with this idealized version of herself she imagined in this singular moment. For Trilling, she is not authentic because she is not able to reach her own standards of action that she sets up in these 50 words. She does not respect us, nor does she march with us. Well, what about Huxley? Aldous, fellow author, fellow Brit. Perhaps he can bring Rowling that coveted sincerity, right? Well, let's see. Huxley discusses art, but notes that he's interested in the talent of the artist, their ability to express the novel in a novel way. That's genuine sincerity to him. Rowling is an artist, but in her expression of her views here, she unfortunately falls back on that most common and conventional conservative refrain. Even though I'm doing blankist acts, I'm not a blankist. This can be, even though I'm passing this racist bill, I'm not a racist. How dare you insinuate such a thing? Or, I'm not a misogynist. I have a wife and 2 daughters. I have a mom. Or in JK's case, I'm not a transphobe. I have trans friends. I would march with you if you were being discriminated against. Sorry, Ms. Rowling. I don't make the rules. Huxley would find your statement rote and played out. Maybe the modern sincerity folks can help Rowling out. Well, maybe. You see, the new sinceres, like Johnston, gain their transcendental, emotional sincerity by rejecting irony and sarcasm, rejecting traditional incentives like money or power, which might dilute or otherwise hinder their ability to express themselves. Rowling, in 2020, does not have many barriers to her speech. She is wealthy beyond imagination, and as a result, it's actually easier to be sincere. If you're working a job and you need to support your family, you're going to have to grit your teeth if your boss or someone in a position of authority over you pushes you to agree with some statement on Black Lives Matter or trans people's rights that you maybe don't agree with. Sure, you might not like it, but you have to live with it to feed your family. You have an incentive, so to speak. Perhaps you have a social incentive to agree with the common consensus on an issue, which is exactly what Rowling criticized Jessie Gender of doing in her awful tweet attacking her, which specifically mentioned pure think. So perhaps, in a roundabout way, Miss Rowling is above us. She can see things more clearly since she's unclouded by incentives that would pull her away from bearing her soul, communicating her true self. But I'm just not seeing it. In her personal blog post about gender issues, published around the same time as this tweet, it's clear she's mired in bad faith arguments and misinformation. She platforms absurd turf talking points and cites research which does not exist. She bases a large amount of her reaction to trans people as a result of trauma that she's experienced at the hands of non-trans people. I'm deeply sorry she experienced male violence and sexual assault, but those personal experiences do not magically make trans people perpetrators of sexual violence. If she had done the research she claims to in this blog post, she would know we're not the threat she worries basic trans rights will create. As a result, she buys into a narrative, a story that doesn't align with her lived reality or really anyone else's. Moreover, she constantly uses irony and sarcasm to push her hateful talking points, hardly the paragon of sincere speech. But you may have noticed something. I skipped over one of our sincere definitions, that being the X and the Y axis of sincerity. On the X-axis, we've got the truthfulness of the statement. as in how objectively true is it. If on one side 2 plus 2 is 4, Rowling's claim that she respects us and wants to march with us is on the other side of that graph. But I think Rowling was being sincere when she wrote it. She wrote a lie, don't get me wrong, but she believed it. My reasoning for believing is in part because I know people, and people are very good at lying to themselves. I'm good at it too. We want to be the kind of people we envision in our head, and maybe in some fantasy world concocted in Rowling's head, there's some line that she'd march if it was crossed. But that's just it. It's a fantasy concocted in her head. Any reasonable line was crossed over long ago, and she's clearly on the wrong side of it. Still, I have to give it to her. We can't prove she wasn't being sincere by this definition, that she isn't just on the side of the graph where someone genuinely believes what they're saying, and what they're saying is also demonstrably false. But why do I care so much? For one, because I deeply care about sincerity, something we'll get into in a second. But also because Rowling herself is also deeply concerned with sincerity. Well, the sincerity of transgender people and trans advocates. Ironically, she almost always turns to that postmodern sarcasm the new sincerity folks hate. Let's look at some tweets from just the past month. In this tweet, she criticizes 3 Scottish politicians who were at a pro-trans rights rally in which someone else had a sign calling for violence against TERFs. Each politician claims to have not seen the signs, but Rowling suggests they are being insincere. In this tweet, Rowling quotes a criticism of Nicola Sturgeon, which suggests she's trashing women's rights, aka promoting trans rights, not because it's something she believes in, but because it makes her look progressive. This tweet uses the phrase self-described progressive politicians to question the progressive bona fides of pro-trans rights politicians. Finally, in her tweet about Jessie Gender's criticism of buying Hogwarts Legacy, she sarcastically suggests Jessie is not sincere enough, since she isn't extreme enough in her views. And above this, a lot of the causes that J.K. Rowling champions, such as the right to single-sex spaces, fundamentally question the sincerity of trans women and trans people. They suggest that trans people are not being sincere in being transgender and instead just want access to women's only or men's only spaces, which is just not true, right? We're not predators who are seeking to sneak into women's spaces and do nefarious things. We're just women looking to use the bathroom. In all of these instances, Rowling seems to doubt the sincerity of trans people, trans activists, and pro-trans rights politicians. And I think it's because she has a limited imagination. I know, she gave us Harry Potter. She's quite imaginative in certain ways. But regarding political debate, she genuinely seems to believe that if you are not on her side, you are not a sincere person, that you are not genuine with your beliefs. If you're a politician, you're just doing it to look progressive. If you're a trans activist, you're doing it because you hate women's spaces. If you're a pro-trans doctor or therapist, you're lying to patients, deluding them into thinking they are something they are not. And if you're trans, you are delusional, incapable of having sincere and genuine feelings about this topic, because you couldn't possibly understand what it's like for women survivors of abuse to have to share their single-sex spaces with transgender women, who they view as men. It's a lot of projection, and most of it is easy to disprove. Politicians who support trans rights don't do so because it's politically expedient, but usually because they believe in trans rights and want to represent their constituents. If we look at the US and Britain right now, the far more politically motivated side are the anti-trans rights folks, pushing mountains of legislation to limit our rights. You know, Joanne, some people might call that discrimination. Pro-trans doctors and therapists help trans people transition because it's clinically proven to be good for their patients, not because they have some weird agenda. And trans people are genuine. We have always existed. We are not a fad. JK loves to screenshot and retweet messages she and other TERFs receive which say vile things. And I don't condone that. But I am a super small YouTuber, and I get hateful messages too, because I'm trans, as do all proudly out trans people. We are victims of verbal and physical violence, often at rates far exceeding cisgender people, specifically because of our identity. Trans men, trans women, and non-binary people are vastly more likely to be victims of abuse than cis women. To be clear, the point isn't to argue which group has it worse. This isn't the sad Olympics. The point is that Rowling's ideas and criticisms don't stand up to scrutiny. They're not reflective of the real world, only a fictional one made up in her head. It's clear Rowling has isolated herself in a bubble, one where she and people like her are the only sincere ones. Anyone who disagrees, insincere, corrupted, and duplicitous. She can't fathom we have legitimate reasons for our actions and beliefs. And to me, that is the most profound limit on the power of sincerity I can imagine. To keep sincerity for yourself and deny it for everyone else. Still, even though we've spent all this time talking about her in this video, Rowling isn't why I made this. Rowling just presented an avenue to discuss this topic. In reality, I've been contemplating my own relationship to sincerity for a long time, and I continue to have conflicted feelings on it. I've said a few times in this video that I deeply care about sincerity, but what does that mean? Well, for most of my life, sincerity has been my guiding star. When I'm struck with a difficult decision or conflict, I always seek to find a sincere solution. I ask pointed questions to people, try to suss out their sincerely held opinions and beliefs, understand what influences their actions, and explain best I can why I'm saying and doing what I'm saying and doing. So they might see my sincere intentions, and through sincerity, we might be able to find an equitable solution. I usually feel like I'm sincere to the point of being annoying. For a lifetime, I've looked at the world around me and felt a profound lack of sincerity in my home culture. Mountains of irony and sarcasm pervade our media, which pokes fun at both sides of every argument and never takes a stand on what it believes in. In all kinds of movies, games, shows, and books, people rarely say what they mean. They hide behind jokes, cuts to music, to dramatic action. Words have little currency, and earnest words even less. Media have gotten very good at making you feel things, but their messages are usually as hollow as a dead tree when you examine them. My reaction? To try to be sincere, to try to say what I mean, to genuinely express my thoughts and emotions to the best of my abilities. I do weird things. I tell my friends I love them every time I see them. I look every person I buy something from in the eye and say thank you. I try not to lie when someone asks me how I'm doing, even though I'm often feeling overwhelmed and depressed. I make these stupid YouTube videos, and in them I try to explain why I find little aspects of video games interesting and meaningful. Being this way it's inconvenient. I don't think this makes me better than other people though. It's just the only way that I can live with myself at the end of the day. When I take insincere actions, when I don't match up to some internal version of myself I'm striving after, I can't sleep at night. I feel disjointed and broken, even more so than usual. When I started this channel, my biggest worry was that I'd just waste your time, that I'd use up 20 minutes of your life and not give anything back, that I'd create idle and forgettable things to burn your precious seconds away. The possibility that's what I make was and still is my biggest fear. Maybe I'm worried that if I'm wasting your time, I'm wasting mine too. But genuinely, deep down, I care about you, the person on the other side of this camera, the other side of this screen. It's not fashionable, but when I think about you, I get sad. I struggle against myself to know what to say, to know how to say it, to give you something worth the attention that you're giving me right now. Sincerity is always an uphill battle, and it's rarely rewarding. And yet, despite my best efforts, I do stupid things. I make dumb meme thumbnails, choose video topics based on spur-of-the-moment decisions with little thought put into them. I flip and flop and hate what I make half of the time. When I read Huxley, I worry I'm not even talented enough to be sincere for you. I tell you half-truths, worry about what you will think about me, worry about this masculine voice, cut lines that might be controversial to someone out there. I worry about revealing too much, giving someone who might wish me harm ammunition. I do not directly lie to you, but I'm quick to omit uncomfortable things. I'm a walking contradiction. I desire above all else to be sincere, but I'm not. I'm awful and self-conscious and limited. It's funny, and this is maybe the stupidest, most genuine thing I've ever said, but there's a huge difference between being sincere, like J.K. Rowling may well be, and being sincerely sincere. To be sincerely sincere is to be sincere about being sincere. Being sincerely sincere definitely doesn't mean super sincere. It just means you're self-conscious about your own intentions, your own genuineness, skeptical of how who you are on the inside and the outside match up. It's to reckon with all your own little insecurities, to know the flaws in your character, to work to remedy them and agonize over your imperfections. There's a fine line between that and just abject self-deprecation, but I'm trying to work that out. While writing about Daniel Johnston, a profound thought entered my head. You think you want to be sincere, but you don't. Sure, I think I want to be like Daniel Johnston, bare my heart to you, speak and sing simple truths, because simple truths are the ones that matter most, the ones easiest to ignore, easiest to forget. But just like Johnston sings in Peekaboo, you can listen to these songs and have a good time and walk away. But for me, it's not that easy. I have to live these songs forever. And I have to ask myself, do I want to live this sincerity forever? Do I want to push myself that hard? Do I want to break myself for this ideal? Be sincerely sincere in a way that can hurt me? And what if that goal is unachievable? What if it's not worth the pain and hurt and effort it takes? What do you or I get out of it anyways? Am I any more human if I sincerely embrace being sincere? No. It actually kind of feels like you're less human if you try. So why do it? I don't know. The only reason I can tell you is because it feels like the right thing to do, the only me thing to do. And if I'm not like this, I won't recognize myself. I will give up and I will burn out. Sincerity is the only direction I know. It's the most solid part of me. So as you can imagine, Rowling, someone whose idea of sincerity seems to exclude and divide, burn bridges and ignore truth, worries me a great deal. I worry that's what I may become. It's not a far fall, after all, from sincerely sincere, whatever that means, to prohibitively sincere, believing you're the only genuine one in a sea of corrupted liars. I have to imagine it's pretty nice to be in that zone, to not to worry so much about all of this, for what you think to be right just because you are the one who thought it. But even if I have to strain against the current of my own impulses, I promise you I'll try to be sincere. If not for me, then for you, for your time as you experience my art, because all I want is to enrich your life. You know, I started my channel after I saw the video Action Button Reviews Doom. Like, I literally thought, while watching it, I need to start a YouTube channel. I was astonished a piece of video game criticism could be so personal and profound. My favorite part of that video is in Ultraviolent, The Point, Dirtbag Nation, or Hard Hooked on Digital Red. It's a long title. At the end of the section, he breaks character, cuts to himself editing the video, and says he didn't say what he wanted to say, and that he'll try to do better next time. I think about that cut all the time. I don't know how sincerely sincere Tim Rogers is or isn't. I don't know him. But I do know that moment stuck with me because it mattered. It showcased a kind of sincerity I want to engender. Maybe to some degree, this video is me looking back at everything I've made, surveying the landscape, and saying that I want to do better. Maybe I don't have the talent. Maybe I can't make videos as good as the ones that inspire me, but I'd like to try. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm Error, signing off.